Welcome to CSL TV. And I just hope you guys are having a beautiful, blessed day. Now, if you're new to the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, like, comment. You know what I'm saying? What made you watch CSL TV? And this is pretty much a review, a reaction, and an informational channel. Now, the informational part is something that could probably help you out in life, or maybe could be educational to somebody else. And we just gonna watch some videos and talk about it. Maybe that can educate us on certain things and what we should and shouldn't do, because you see what we do over here. And I appreciate you guys who's been rocking with me. You know what I'm saying? This stuff is not easy, even though I watch stuff like this on the daily, so I guess it is kind of easy. But beautiful people, let's get it.
While Mark was taking a nap, Dylan used his computer, and he found some things that would horrify and disgust him.
He found pictures of Mark dressed in women's clothing. Dylan lost any reasons for him to look up to Mark that day.
Dylan Nicholas Redwine was born on February 6, 1991, to his parents Elaine and Mark Redwine. Dylan also had a brother named Corey, who was 7 years older than he was, but despite this age gap, the two boys were very close growing up. Corey and Dylan grew up in the mountains of southwest Colorado in a place called Bayfield. It seemed that for several years, Mark Redwine was a pretty good father. He was even a stay-at-home dad for some time when Dylan was younger, which led to a special and close bond between father and son. But after 18 years of marriage, Elaine and Mark got divorced in 2007, and she was granted full custody of both their sons. Mark was allowed visitation, but after the divorce, he was distant physically and emotionally, and he rarely took advantage of his visitation rights. When Elaine remarried, she moved to Colorado Springs with her new husband, Michael Hall, in June of 2012, and she took Dylan with her. While they were living with their mother and stepfather, Corey and Dylan would periodically visit with their father. Sometimes it would be for a week or a weekend, whatever Mark Redwine's schedule as a long-haul truck driver would allow. But the divorce and following custody disputes had been contentious, and it seemed Mark had started talking very negatively about Dylan's mother, Elaine, and it had caused a decline in the relationship between Mark and his son, Dylan, who was reaching his teenage years. So in 2012, when the courts mandated that 13-year-old Dylan was going to spend the Thanksgiving holiday with his father, when Dylan landed in Durango, Colorado, a city about 30 minutes away from where Mark Redwine lived in Bayfield, Mark Redwine picked Dylan up from the airport, and video surveillance shows their next two stops were to Walmart to pick up some things, and then to the McDonald's drive-thru to grab some food. In the Walmart surveillance video, there seems to be tension between Dylan and his father, with Dylan appearing to be standoffish towards Mark. After that, Mark drove to his home, which is in a pretty rural area. After they got home, Dylan texted his best friend in Bayfield, Ryan Nava, and asked if he could spend the night. Apparently, this idea was run by Mark, and he said no. So Ryan told Dylan to come over very early the next morning at 6:30 a.m. According to cell phone records, the last activity on Dylan's cell phone that night was a text he got from his mother around 10 p.m., but Dylan never responded. No one ever talked to Dylan again after that night. Mark said that after he and Dylan had gotten home, they'd thrown a Nerf football around outside for a bit, and then they'd watched a movie that he'd purchased at Walmart. Mark said he went to bed around 9:30 or 10, and he said that Dylan was still awake at this point, but he probably didn't stay up much longer. The next morning, Dylan's friend Ryan texted him at 6:45 a.m., asking where he was. According to Mark Redwine, he himself woke up fairly early that morning at 5:45 a.m., and he apparently was planning to bring Dylan to his friend Ryan's house. And Mark said he got ready for the day, and he kept himself busy until 7:30 when he tried to wake Dylan up, who was sleeping on the couch. Dylan wouldn't wake up, so Mark left without him and went to his office to meet with his lawyer. Mark's cell phone records show that he texted Dylan 4 times that day. During the time that he was sending these messages, cell phone tower data shows that Mark Redwine drove from his home to Durango, which is about 30 minutes away, and then back from Durango to his home. Mark also called Dylan's phone 7 times. The last time he called was at 9:32 that night, and he called again at 7:19 the next morning. After that, Mark Redwine never called or texted his son again. At 4:32 p.m. on November 19th, Mark texted his ex-wife saying, "Elaine, I'm wondering if you have heard from Dylan. I've been trying to reach him all afternoon." Mark told Elaine that he had just left the marshal's office where he had reported Dylan missing. This is around like 4:30 in the afternoon. But Elaine called the marshal's office and they didn't know anything. They didn't know anything about Dylan, and they certainly did not have a missing persons report for Dylan. Dylan's friend Ryan said that Mark went over to his house that day looking for Dylan, and Mark also made some calls to some of Dylan's other friends, but no one had seen the 13-year-old boy or talked to him since the previous night. The initial search for Dylan would continue until 1 a.m. that night that he went missing, or that day he went missing, and they're still searching for him. But Mark Redwine was not searching for him.
We were inseparable. I mean, anywhere I was, he was right there beside me. You know, he would come to me before he would go to his mom.
The search picked up at 7 a.m. the next morning, and by this time, Elaine, her husband, and Corey were there to participate. But Mark Redwine, once again, did not. Police started exploring the possibility that Dylan had run away. Mark was pushing that narrative, and Dylan's mother, Elaine, pushed back against this theory hard. Law enforcement executed a search warrant at the house, and one of the main things they would be looking for was any sign that Dylan had been injured in that house. Dylan Redwine's blood was found in multiple locations in the living room. Now, the blood being on the floor underneath the carpet suggested that someone had tried to clean the blood up, because the rug did not test positive for blood. Law enforcement believes the tension between Mark and his son Dylan reached a head in 2011 when Mark was out of town and he got back into Colorado, and he called his two sons, Corey and Dylan, and he said, "Pack some bags, we're hitting the road." Mark took Dylan and Corey to Michigan for Father's Day, and they spent some time going to baseball games, watching car races, just hanging out. But one day, while Mark was taking a nap, Dylan used his computer, and he found some things that would horrify and disgust him. Things that, of course, he had to show his brother, Corey. These are pictures, selfies of Mark Redwine dressed in a woman's bra, wearing makeup, and wearing a diaper. So Dylan sees these pictures, and then he and Corey locked themselves in the bathroom of the hotel, and Corey actually used his own cell phone to take pictures of the pictures that were on the computer screen.
Man, so you mean to tell me this horrifying thing that he saw was his son wearing, women clothing now? How was that horrifying? Maybe, he just playing around, for one. Maybe he thought it was funny because he seen something. Or 3, maybe he just discovering what makes him feel like him. What makes him come alive and feel like who he should be instead of something that's dead and not living. So you should be happy is that he's expanding and trying to understand what he is and who he is. Just like trying to identify yourself.
Pictures that were on the computer screen.
Can you explain to the jury what he found?
He found pictures of Mark dressed in women's clothing, wearing a diaper, taking selfies of him. He was pretty disgusted. It was something that Dylan lost any reasons for him to look up to Mark that day.
But not long after this, Mark and Dylan went on another trip, just the two of them. And apparently, while this was going on, Mark was bitching and complaining because Corey and Mark had a falling out. And Mark said some things about his mother and brother that Dylan was offended by, including that Mark believed Elaine and Corey were bad influences and bad role models. Corey was seeing a movie with some friends, and he started getting these repeated calls and texts from Dylan. So he left the theater, he opened his texts, and he saw a text from Dylan that said, "Hey, send me those poop pics of Papa because he gave me a speech about you guys being a bad example, and I want to show him who really is." And this was in August of 2012. 3 months before Dylan vanished. Corey said that he didn't send the pictures to Dylan because he didn't want to add fuel to an already raging fire, but Dylan asked for them over and over again. On June 26, 2013, the partial remains of 13-year-old Dylan Redwine were found in a wooded area off Middle Mountain Road. just a few miles from Mark's home. They also found scraps of a t-shirt that Dylan had owned from an event or a concert or something he'd attended with his father. They found a pair of earbuds, like to listen to music. They found one shoe and one sock and the elastic band from a pair of underwear. He'd also suffered a skull fracture that happened around the time he was killed, and there were 2 small marks on his skull that appeared to have been made by a kitchen knife or some other sharp object or tool. Mark Redwine was found guilty of these charges: second-degree murder and child abuse resulting in death. He could be behind bars for as little as 8 years or as many as 48 years. Being that Mark is in his 50s, let's hope it's the latter, for society's sake. Thank you guys so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Well, since this is like still ongoing, and you guys can see it's clearly COVID times, you know what I'm saying? Let's just hope justice is served, as this beautiful woman said. Coffee and crime. Shout out to her in this content, because this is sad that you can't be who you are, who you is, whatever you consider yourself, without someone wanting to do bodily harm to you. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, it's just sad. I can't say this is an American thing, because it's something in this world. This world is just contaminated and feel everybody should have this image or that image. You know what I'm saying? When you just your own person. When you come out and you're born, even if you're a twin, you're not given the same identification, which means you're not going to be given the same social security number. You already have a number as soon as you're born to identify who you are as a human. Now, who you are as a person, that's totally up to you and the character that you create and the image, and you know what I'm saying? So, maybe this is a way of him trying to get back closer contact with his son, instead of doing some dumbass, oh, well, your mom's with this guy type shit. You feel me? Because you still, as a parent, have responsibilities.